welcome to the channel. I'm Task Force Bourbon. Today I'm going to be reviewing Stagg Junior Batch 17, also known as the Last Junior. Very excited to pop this one. It's been popped before, as you can tell, but it's a good thing, trust me. So, spoiler alert. But before I do, like is tradition with the rest of my stuff that I do, is I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the history of Stagg Junior and George T. Stagg sort of writ large here. So, Stagg Junior is a barrel-proof bourbon, right, from Buffalo Trace. It's one of two bourbons that belong part of that George T. Stagg named line, with the other being George T. Stagg, part of the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection. That's one of 5 bourbons in the BTAC line. Now, this is the junior version of that, and we'll talk a bit about why that junior moniker exists in a moment here. All right, but that's named after George T. Stagg, like I said. He is a man who helped keep O.F.C. Distillery afloat, and then formed E.H. Taylor Jr. and Company with partner E.H. Taylor Jr., of course. After Taylor parted ways, Stagg grew the distillery to be America's leading bourbon producer. With this achievement, the distillery took on Stagg's name, but we all know it as Buffalo Trace Distillery today. So they honor that history and that man with naming some bourbons after him. So George T. Stagg and the Stagg Jr. So Stagg Jr., this one's batch 17, is now about to be in its 18th year, or 18th birthday, if you will. So with that, that junior quote part always felt a little off, according to Sazerac's Global Bourbon Brands manager, Joshua Steely. All right, so in the same way that Sazerac Rye or Weller Special Reserve doesn't carry a junior after their brand names, it seems the Buffalo Trace finally feels like one of their flagship bourbons can do without it as well. So George T. Stagg, the person himself, was not a junior, so the implication that it's a lesser or younger brand feels like it's an unnecessary embellishment. And we all, for those of you who had Stagg Junior, we all know and love Stagg Junior, and most of us do, and understand that it can exist as a brand on its own away from George T. Stagg. The only difference really between George T. Stagg and Stagg Junior is the age. Okay, with George T. Stagg coming in at about 15 to 19 year age range, and George T. Stagg about 8 to 9 years. It never really breaks into those double digits. At the MSRP, and this is part of the reason why they had the Stagg Junior coming in inception in 2013 with Batch 1, was sort of a value offering of the higher end of their premium line there, and so that came in about $50 to $60. With the hype behind the Last Junior, you'll see this commonly go for $330 to $350. That's a shame, in my opinion, but and again, spoiler alert here, I think it's definitely worth the hype. It's a fantastic bourbon. We're going to check it out and get a little bit of tasting notes in just a second. So that news did come out in about November of 2021. And according to the Bourbon Review page, it does say that it is attributed to its 18th birthday. So that's where we're getting the only existence of that information. So with the George T. Stagg not coming out 2021, there doesn't seem to be any legitimate connection to that and this. But a lot of speculation does exist in terms of George T. Stagg and Stagg Jr., coming out in its stead. Does that mean that we're seeing some George T. Stagg, mixture going on here? Who's to say, right? Besides Harlan Wheatley, the master distiller over there, right? So if he wants to chime in and join in on the live channel, I'd much appreciate it, and so would my other few followers. All right, so but what we'll go ahead and do is we'll crack this open and get to the good stuff. That's an excellent pop. As always, we're going to make sure we have a healthy pour to get those tasting notes, even if I've already had a pour before it. But what we'll see here, for those who haven't seen a Stagg Junior bottle, is the back label here with a little bit of information on the back. You got a cool, top there. And what you'll see, the difference is you won't notice that they'll have any other batch numbers on it. There'll be a proof, and that proof you'll have to look up in a chart online and find out which batch in fact is. It's unique proof to the batch. All right. So the nose right up front, as is no surprise, you know right up front it's a barrel-proof bourbon, so it's going to be have a bit of force behind it, but it definitely, the aroma matches that proof. You get a lot of classic stuff going on. You got the caramel. You don't get a lot of vanilla. And you get some fruit. I won't spoil what fruit that is because it does carry into the open, or not the open rather, but the mid. And surprisingly, you don't get a whole lot of oak on the nose, which you might think would exist in something that is such a higher proof as George T. Stagg, especially something like that you would see at a Buffalo Trace. We'll take the first sip now and see what happens. Wow. Right up front, a lot of full force, rich. You can see it's definitely packs a punch. And that's not uncommon. I have with me here on the side, I got batch 15 and 16 with me. I wasn't the biggest fan of 16 in the lineup that I've had, with Stagg, but the 15 was pretty good. And anyways, that is consistent with the Stagg Junior brand at least. Very, very full, powerful, rich, a lot of oak. But right up front, you're met with a lot of thick molasses and caramel opening up that palate. And I say molasses and not maple syrup, right? Because it's that thick part that separates those two notes for me. And so the mid, you really get that signature Stagg Junior oak starting to come through, and that lasts all the way to the finish. All right, but I got a big however comma here because it's accented with a lot of flavorful notes, and some of those, just a few of those that stand out to me. You got a nice cherry, you got some butterscotch, and maybe this might be unique to me, but I get a bit of cotton candy, and I think I'm getting that because it's got a little bit of light thing going on, but it's still kind of sweet. I almost like when I picture in my head this pink kind of cotton candy. There's a little bit just in the background there. And it works really well behind that oak, right? So this is in no way, shape, or form a sweet bourbon, right? It's very oak heavy. It's a very masculine type pour, and that doesn't mean that a female couldn't equally enjoy it, right? But what I mean is just very, very sort of strong oak flavors, but it does have a lot of flavorful stuff going on, behind the mid there. Okay, so let's see what else we get here. So that, again, that classic Stagg Junior Oak Barrel Proof, heat comes on the finish. But it includes those flavorful and sweet notes that are on the mid. And it works really well together. And we were talking about this before, a buddy of mine and I. It's not necessarily the most well-balanced thing I've had, but that's not a bad thing. And I used a metaphor about what do you call it, a music mixer. An equalizer, right? Where you have the up and down, treble, bass, treble, whatever, right? I'm not a musician, okay? You have all those things going on, and those are set, at different, numbers there to produce the most, best piece of music you can produce. Now, this is like you want to turn it all up, treble, bass, everything's all, at the max, and that's something you're going to dance to. That's when you want to get, hyped up and you want to do something, right? This is what's going on here. You get all those flavor notes, that oak, all of it's just dialed up to 10. And so that means that it's not well balanced, right? But, it's a good thing, right? Because this is something you want to dance to, all right? It's good stuff. Let's go ahead and get another sip here, get some final tasting notes before I tell you my rating. Okay, so on that open, it starts out just really rich, okay? And then the mid, you're starting to see that oak creep forward, but again, you got those flavorful notes. There's a bit of cherry, not like a Maker's Mark sort of cherry, and again, this comes from those that know, this comes from mash bill number 1. That's a low rye bourbon, all right? It's an undisclosed mash bill, but compared to mash bill number 2, right, 1 of 2. If you exclude the wheat mash bill from Buffalo Trace, this is 1 of 2, main core mash bills from them, with mash bill 2 being the high rye, 12 to 15% rye. This being underneath that, at a low rye, speculated low rye mash bill. So we're not seeing much rye here, which is, not a big shocker. Yeah, from that mid to the finish, I'm giving this a 5.0. Right, that's a perfect 5.0 out of 10.0, you know, or a 5.0 rating scale. So 10 on a 10.0 rating scale. And while I could be argued this is a 4 or 5 due to those, you know, dialed up attributes there and they're not being well balanced, everything just seems to work. And I hate to get on board that hype train sometimes, you know, and I really wanted to dispel the rumor when I did Pappy 20 and 23 and, you know, some of those bourbons, but whatever it means, you know, as far as, you know, call me a tater or whatever you want, but this is a fantastic bourbon. It's definitely one I recommend picking up. You know, I don't, again, necessarily condone paying $350 for it. If you do, you know, as always, you should be drinking it neat, but, you know, maybe drink it a little bit more slowly. I don't know. That's dependent on each other, you know, your own means. But all right, one last sip here, pending any questions. Let's see. I got NASDAQ Attack saying, this whiskey review brought to you by Phil Spector. Thanks. So Jay Michaela says, love those healthy pours of yours. You know, that's the way you got to do it, man. You know, you got to make sure, you know, you don't make a mistake on these tasting notes, and that's one surefire way to make sure that happens. Yeah, an excellent pour. Again, I'm going to go ahead and take a guess here because 16 was, I think, a 4 for me. It actually was one of the few anomalies in the Stagg Junior line that I just didn't quite feel it lived up to the Stagg Junior name, or now what will be the Stagg name. But 15 was fantastic. I'm gonna have to do a blind fight to tell the truth. Let's go ahead. What one is this? 130.9. Let me make sure I got the right here. I'm gonna move to the side just a sec. We got 15 is 131.1. All right. Oh, I had it backwards. This is 15. Obviously, you know how I should have been able to tell? Is one of them has more in it than the other. That's a good way to tell which one's better sometimes. So what we'll do is we'll take just a quick little sip. Ooh. And compare the two. Let me go ahead. I got a little water dropper that I need to use sometimes to be able to dig out. Maybe the finish might be a little too oak forward, and that's fantastic. I got that figured out. Now you need to figure out what are some of the notes behind it. Water's a great way to do it. You never want to drink your bourbon with ice, you know, because the cold, and you can read some of, you know, my other post there, you know, I'll tell you about how that actually affects those flavor molecule compounds and what have yous to adversely affect the bourbon. All right, we're not getting all scientific, so we don't need to really clean this thing completely out, but I'll pour just a smidge, just so I can kind of compare, since I got the 17 still in my channel. Let me go ahead and just get that squared up. NASDAQ Attack says, I think you should bring a friend up with less experience than you to get an alternative perspective. I'm guessing you're volunteering yourself for that. Come on through, man. Oh, Jan Michaela, he beat you to the punch. Sorry, he binned it. He's there. Wow. Another fantastic win. But you know what? This is going to take more, a little bit more than just sitting here doing a one-off, sample here, because they taste very similar to one another. Surprise! They're a batch off, the same brand, same no change in master distiller, and in fact even the same year, one spring, one fall. All right, this one seems to have less of that heavy oak, dominant thing going on than the 17. Maybe that proves a little bit to the rumor with the George T. Stagg, existing somewhere within this bottle. I don't know. So just a touch less rich than the 17. But you still get the same flavors, which is kind of interesting, right? So you get that same thick molasses, same caramels, but you don't know, it's a little less rich. You lose what I'm liking on the 17th is those flavorful notes that you find in the mid, like the candy, cotton candy, right, for example, or the cherry. You lose those a little bit, you know, on that last batch there. But you know, I'm going 17. I'm going 17 over 16 every day of the week. But you know, none of them are bad. Really, if you buy a Stagg Junior, you're not going wrong. Okay. If you buy a Stagg Junior from me, you're definitely not going wrong. So, you know, let me know if that's something you're into, and I'll send you my address. But other than that, enjoy, guys. I hope you enjoyed Stagg Junior, the last junior, and cheers.